I'm going to call this meeting to order. Roll call.
Kelly Graham.
Here.
Malin Luttrell.
Here.
Mark Webb.
Here.
Margaret Firerobin.
Here.
Jason Boer.
Here.
Takai Shu.
Here.
Joel Staten is here. Scott Gaynor.
Here.
Kevin Buck.
Here.
We're all here, sir.
Very good. Very good. Counselor, discussion of necessity for conducting this meeting.
Yes, Chairman. As you guys know by now, the governor has by executive order allowed governing bodies such as the Planning Commission to conduct their meetings electronically when it's necessary to protect the health, safety, and welfare of Tennesseans in light of the COVID-19 outbreak. At this time, it would be appropriate for the members to discuss whether they believe that meeting electronically is necessary and to vote accordingly by roll call. If you don't agree that meeting electronically is necessary, then this meeting should be adjourned. But if all the members agree that if the majority of the members agree that it should be conducted electronically, then the meeting can continue.
Does anybody have any objection to this meeting being held this way?
No.
Hearing, seeing none, thank you all. We will then proceed forward with the
Mr.
approval
Chairman?
of the minutes. You've got the July 20 minutes in front of you. I hope everybody has reviewed them. Any changes, additions, or corrections? Hearing, seeing none, is there a motion to accept as presented?
Just real quick, Mr. Chairman, Danielle, did they need to do a roll call vote on the electronic?
It's ideally yes, but if we can, that would be great if we can go back and just do a quick roll call.
Could you do a quick roll call vote on the electronic?
Very good. We'll go back. Joel, if you'll call.
I'm ready. Kelly
Is
Graham.
everybody okay with this being an electronic meeting? Joel, if you would call that roll call, please.
Kelly Graham.
Yes.
Malin Luttrell.
Yes.
Joel Staten is yes. Jason Boer.
Yes.
Kevin Buck.
Yes.
Scott Gaynor.
Yes.
Takai Shu.
Yes.
Mark Webb.
Yes.
Margaret Firerobin.
Margaret, you're
Mark.
muted.
You're muted, Margaret.
That was a yes for Margaret.
Let the record show she gave 2 thumbs up.
All right. Is there a motion on the approval of the minutes?
So move.
We
Second.
have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Who
And
seconded
we
it?
have a second.
Malin.
Okay. Okay. Kelly Graham.
Yes.
Malin Luttrell.
Yes.
Joel Staten is yes. Jason Boer.
Yes.
Kevin Buck.
Yes.
Scott Gaynor.
Yes.
Takai Shu.
Yes.
Mark Webb.
Yes.
Margaret Firerobin.
Yes.
Thank you, Margaret.
It is now time for unscheduled comments from the public. Does it stand that there's still not anybody from the public that wants to address us?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman. We have no members from the public here to address you concerning items not on the agenda.
All right. We will address comments from the public when we get to each individual agenda item, and everybody will have an opportunity at that point in time. Can they hear us right now, the people that are going to speak?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. It's live. They're live. There's no delay.
Okay, so they're watching monitors right now?
Yes, in the City Hall Annex. Yes, sir.
Okay. What I'll say to them now, which is the same thing that'll come up when they do speak. Anybody that does address the Planning Commission, please give your name and address for the minutes, and it'll be part of the record. Now then, old business, historical preservation awards. Sheriff?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Sheriff, this is a continuation of your discussion about membership to the Historic Preservation Award Committee. Sheriff Young will give you updates. And I think we are ready, if you all are comfortable with a actionable yes or no, this is who we want on the committee at this time.
Okay, so thank you. Good evening, everybody. We just wanted to follow up on the discussion from last month's meeting about the Historic Preservation Awards Committee. At the conclusion of that conversation, the Planning Commission had suggested that we reach out to Mrs. Gwen Ellis, who lives in the Fairmount District, to see if she would be interested in serving on the committee. We did talk with her, and the real result of that conversation is she appreciated being thought of, but just has a little bit too much on her plate right now to take on an additional role. So we just wanted to kind of come back and circle back with you as to what that conversation was and see where you wanted us to go from there.
Yes, and what's on your screen are the nominations for that committee, the membership of that committee. As we've discussed, if you all want to bless that, that would be great.
I don't see anything on my screen.
Either.
There we go.
There it is.
Here.
Yeah, so the names in the block, the chart block form, are the folks that you all had discussed 2 meetings ago and had put into those places. The names at the bottom, that Krista McClellan, Kim Knoll, those were previous award winners who the commission had discussed at some point putting a previous award winner on there. But there was no conclusion to that conversation other than just talk that there could be concern about the committee getting too large. And then in discussing Gwen Ellis, that's when the commission asked staff to reach out to her to see if she would be available.
Mr. Chairman, I would suggest, and I was supported a larger number, but I would suggest that we look at the citywide winner, Kim Knoll, and perhaps add that citywide winner so that we have one of our past winners on the committee.
Okay. Before we get there, let me ask a question. Is Joel representing the Planning Commission and Scott representing First Tennessee Development District?
Good question.
Oh no, I apologize. That was probably my mistake. It should be that Scott is representing the Planning Commission and Gray Stother is representing the Development District. He's their historic preservation planner.
Now then, back to Margaret's suggestion. Discussion? Is that a motion, Margaret?
Yes, that's a motion that we approve the selection of our Historic Preservation Award Committee members, with those that are listed corrected to be Scott Gaynor and Forrester, First Tennessee Development District representative, and then add to that Kim Knoll, who was a citywide winner last year for our Historical Preservation Awards.
This is Kevin. I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and we have a second. Is there any discussion on the motion that's on the floor? Hearing, seeing none. Somebody say something? Roll call.
Kelly Graham,
Yes.
Malin Luttrell,
Yes.
Joel Staton is yes. Jason Boer,
Yes.
Kevin Buck,
Yes.
Scott Gaynor,
Yes.
Takai Shu,
Yes.
Mark Webb,
Yes.
Margaret Fire Robin.
Yes.
Okay, now who made the motions, please?
I made the motion. Kevin Buck seconded.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, okay. And then we're ready to go ahead to the concept plan.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, up for consideration is a concept plan for 1913 Highway 394. This will be for a Dollar Tree and a fast-paced health clinic. Sheriff Young will give the presentation in 1 second. We do have, if you can promote them to participants, Shane, Adam Ledsinger and Rick Morrow as participants. They're the developers and in this process, so he is going to promote them in for their participation. But with that, Sheriff, if you want to go ahead and do the presentation, that'd be great.
Sure. Thank you. So as Tim said, the request tonight is for a conceptual site plan review for a health clinic and Dollar Tree located on Highway 394. And the reason that the Planning Commission is reviewing this concept plan tonight is because it is located in that Highway 394 overlay. The location is 1913 Highway 394. It's tax map 66 and a portion of parcel 33. And the zoning currently in place is B3, which is our general business services district. The next slide shows a location map of the property. So most everybody will recognize this site there on 394 and Ajero Drive in front of the Ballad building there to the left of Food City and Eastman Credit Union. So this is the location, the parcel that we're talking about tonight. The next slide shows the zoning of the area. So this is all in the B3 zone. So everything around here is zone B3. You have the vacant lot, of course. You have Ballad Health in behind. You have the Bank of Tennessee and Food City to the right. And then you have Eastman Credit Union as well. They're adjacent to this site. The next slide shows just the overall concept plan for this project. So if you look to the bottom left of the screen, you'll see where Highway 394 and Ajero Drive intersect. If you come up Ajero Drive, the first building on the left is the proposed Dollar Tree. Oh, good, Tim, you got the pointer. So the first building there is the Dollar Tree project, which is proposed right at 10,000 square feet. And then the next building over on the right of that is the health clinic, which is proposed at about 2,700 square feet. Show a little bit of a more zoomed in version as we talk about some of the concepts that Planning Commission looks at when they review a concept plan. We talk about access. Again, access is proposed off the Ajero Drive. Staff is continuing to talk and work with the applicant to refine the access here out onto Ajero Drive, but we'll work with them through the site plan process to get that nailed down. The zoning here, as we said, is zone B3. So these proposed buildings do meet the setback requirements for the zoning district. That requirement is a front yard setback of 15 feet and a rear yard of 20 feet. There is no adjoining residential, but if there was adjoining residential, they'd have a setback of 10 feet. The parking here provided is ample and exceeds the zoning ordinance requirements. They're proposing 74 parking spaces on this concept plan. So that does exceed what they're required to submit or provide for these uses. The photometric plan is not provided at this time, but will be reviewed with the site plan application so that we will ensure that the photometric plan is in compliance with the city code requirements for lighting. Landscaping also will be looked at with the site plan. We'll certainly make sure that it meets all the requirements of Chapter 11 or Chapter 11A of the zoning ordinance. A sign permit will also come later, and we'll make sure. Oh.
Okay, I think we just lost Sheriff, so I will continue on. They are showing 2 refuse collection areas, one for each building. This was for the Dollar Tree in the upper left. And then we have for the health clinic right here. And those will require, the refuse areas will require that they be screened per our zoning regulations. And that will be checked with their site plan submission also. This is a photo looking at standing on, well, across Highway 394, looking up a Giro Drive. So this property is going to be here in this wooded area, or the, you know, where it's growing back up where it hasn't been used. This is looking at the property right here is the bank down in this area. And here's the property that we're speaking of. Staff has reviewed the conceptual plan, and they have actually submitted the site plan, so we are in review, and does recommend that the Planning Commission accept and approve the conceptual site plan for the fast-paced health clinic and the Dollar Tree, because it does conform with the planned development area overlay. And with that, I'll answer any questions, or you may want to speak to the developers if you have questions for them.
So before we bring the developers in and ask them questions, let's ask staff if they have any questions about the layout and concept and so forth.
Question.
Anybody in the commission with a question?
Question.
Yes, sir.
I noticed that there's access easements for both buildings, one of them being a little narrower than the other. From past experiences, we have noted that we would, you know, coming off a busy highway like that, would like to have those easements, or those, you know, where traffic can flow at a much slower slower pace to get to these buildings. Would this easement be continued for in the future development area to connect with the bank?
Yes, sir. The proposal is to have these cross-access easements. You have one located here and one in the rear of the property, but to tie into this future development property that they own, and that would ultimately can tie to the bank access right here. Just because they don't have a plan for this right now, obviously they're not showing a concept on, you know, how they would connect over at this time, but
when
access easements are there for this property so that it can be accessed from the bank or a Giro Drive without having to direct connect to the Highway 394 corridor.
Okay, that was my concern for traffic flow, for slower amount of traffic wanting to turn into these areas. They could eventually maybe approach it from the bank, turn it into the bank or a Giro Drive.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Tim, that property, is it owned by the same owner, same developer?
Yes, sir.
The answer of yes, sir, was about the future development, not the bank to the far right side. Am I right?
This property is one parcel right now, and it's owned by the same owner.
But they do not own the piece to the right, which is currently a bank.
Yes, but the bank has a cross-access easement already there, correct?
Exactly what I wanted to ask.
Yes.
So it's already in the bank's site plan of a cross easement to this piece.
Yes, sir. That's what right here, the stub out where I'm circling, that's what that stub out's for.
What about up at the top?
That bank, cause of topography, they're not capable of doing a cross access at the back. But with these 2 easements, depending on what develops on this future lot, you know, you have the 2 where this rear could come around and tie down to this access, and this could come on straight through. So without knowing what they want, you know, without having somebody to go on this lot, it gives them maximum flexibility for having cross access between the known development and the unknown development.
Discuss, if you will, for a second, the fact that the easement coming off of Giro Drive does not line up with the entrance into, isn't that Eastman Credit over to the far left side?
Yes, sir. This is for truck circulation because they do have to have the semis get in and out. Staff, we are looking at this and working with them on making this a little more narrow of an entrance here. But the main reason for that is due to truck circulation to get the loading and unloading for the Dollar Tree. So we're not concerned about that. We've looked at that. We don't see a big issue either way with this. Our bigger concern was this moving this portion right here back a few feet so it's not crowding the signalized intersection. So
Okay, so you don't think it's an issue if somebody's trying to go from this development over to BS over there where Eastman Credit is?
no, sir. The Giro Drive's wide enough they can make that movement.
Okay.
It's got a center turn lane in it.
What other questions do we have for staff? It's not required that the developer speak to this, but if they want to, we'd be more than happy to hear you. However, when you speak, please give us your name and address once again for the record. Adam, Rick, either one of y'all want to speak?
This is Rick Morrow from Hohenwald, Tennessee, actually. And we just appreciate you guys taking a look at our site plan tonight. Happy to answer any questions. I think that staff obviously has done a good job with reviewing. It's probably pretty much answered any questions that you've got there, but we just appreciate you taking a look at it. We think it'll be a good, solid development for the community. Two highly respected tenants there with Dollar Tree, and then we're the preferred developer for the urgent care clinic, which will be fast-paced urgent care. We have several clinics in the East Tennessee area already, all throughout Tennessee and Mississippi and Kentucky as well. I think we're up to 120 offices right now. I think it'll be a good addition to your community. Happy to answer any questions.
I'm Adam Ledsinger. I'm from Lexington, Tennessee. I'm the engineer, and I just want to add that if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those.
All right, Planning Commission, do you have any questions for these two gentlemen?
The only thing I'd like to ask would be anticipated construction start date if everything keeps moving forward.
We will more than likely start as soon as we get through the site planning process and get our review comments and get those addressed satisfactorily to the cities. As soon as we get those addressed for the city.
Good.
Our goal with both of these buildings is to have them open prior to the end of this year.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Anybody else? Any other questions? Any other comments? Truth be known, it's a lot easier to look around the room and do eye contact, but I can generally tell when somebody has a question, but I don't see anybody wanting to ask anything.
Now, are we voting on the site plan or a conceptual plan?
The conceptual site plan. Tim, would you address that, please?
Yes, what this is you're looking at the general layout for the project. The actual site plan you will not be voting on. The general layout will show you the parking lot configuration, building configuration, access, things like that. We are in the process of reviewing the actual site plan. They submitted it already. So based on any of your comments, we'll add those to the site plan review if you have any comments.
So once we vote on the conceptual plan, we won't necessarily see the site plan, correct?
Correct.
So if anybody has any comments about the lighting, anything, now's the time to bring it to the attention of staff, and they will incorporate that into the site review.
Just a note, design standards, we already had them for our overlay district, but so those will be in place, I'm assuming.
No, the design standards become effective the 21st of this month. since they've submitted this previously already, the site plan, they would not fall under those.
Does
But
it fall under our overlay district though?
the overlay district does have some design standards
Right.
currently, yes.
Right.
But
Thank
those are the new design standards become effective Friday, so.
Great. Okay.
I got one curiosity question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
The lower boundary where the landscape buffering is comes up to a V there, knocking out some parking places. What is that the setback? How is that?
When TDOT completes projects and constructs projects, they buy the right of way to the top and bottom of cut and fill slopes.
Yeah. Okay.
So they own the cut and fill slopes to the road. And this one that was just where the toe of the slope or top of the slope was at the time of construction when they designed the project. So that's why it V's out like that.
Okay. It's not feasible to straighten that up, or since there's
They would have to approach TDOT to see if they'd be willing to sell that property to them.
okay. Just curious.
Yeah, we actually have already done that, and it would be a long, extended process and may or may not get completed.
Right.
Oh, boy. Okay.
So I would I know our new design standards don't go into effect till Friday, but I would hope that our staff has shared those with our developers, who seem to be very, very experienced and also good for working with our community. And maybe there's some of the concepts that they could follow even as they would wish to, as opposed to being required to, since it's so close.
We'll make sure to share those. The Dollar Tree, if it's similar to the one on West State, would meet those design standards
Right.
currently. And
Great.
we'll work with them on the both of them, but we'll share those with them just so they can see what's
Right.
coming up.
Yeah, the Dollar Tree is a split face block on the bottom, stucco on the top, frontage and going back, I think 20 feet on each side of the building as well. It's the typical Dollar Tree design that has the oval over the storefront where the signage goes. Very attractive building with Dollar Tree colors and logos. The fast-paced urgent care building is an all brick and stone structure as well on all four sides. So both buildings are very attractive buildings. I'm not sure exactly what your design standards are, but I think you'll be very well pleased with them. But we're happy to take a look at your design standards as well. We want to work with the community, as best we can.
Thanks. And also, if you have any feedback for our design standards, they're new. So we're just rolling them out. And with experience in other areas, we'd appreciate any feedback as well. That'd be great.
Certainly.
Okay, I believe that's going to wrap up comments from Planning Commission and from the developers. So now if we had a motion.
Move to approve. Margaret.
Thank you, Margaret.
Second,
Who was
Scott?
that?
Scott?
Okay.
Yeah, I did. Scott did, but I don't know. Somebody else jumped in. So either one.
Thank you, Scott.
Do we now have a motion and a second to approve the conceptual plan?
Yes, we do, sir.
Thank you very much. Is there any discussion about the motion that's on the floor? Roll call.
Kelly Graham,
Yes.
Malin Luttrell,
Yes.
Joel Staton is yes. Jason Boer,
Yes.
Kevin Buck,
Yes.
Scott Gaynor,
Yes.
Takai Shu,
Yes.
Mark Webb,
Yes.
Margaret Fire-Robin.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Gentlemen, we appreciate you all bringing another development to Bristol. Thank you
Thank you very
much.
much. We're
Thank
looking
you,
forward
guys.
to working with staff toward getting this all approved and getting a building permit and getting under construction.
Thank you for your time, guys.
Thank you.
Next up is a rezone request on 2620 Volunteer Parkway. Staff.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, up for consideration is rezoning requests for the old Sunset Motel at 2620 Volunteer Parkway down near the Speedway. Currently, the property is split zoned. So it currently zone B3 in the front, and Sheriff can get into it, but I think it's a R3 in the back of the property. The majority of the property is zoned currently B3. With that, I'll let Sheriff Young, thankfully he's back online, give the presentation.
Yeah, I apologize for that little disappearance. Okay, so as Tim said, we've got a rezoning recommendation request for you all tonight to go from R3, a portion of the property to go from R3 to B3. The applicant owner representative that is going to be with us here momentarily is Larry Presley. He's the executive vice president of Powell Valley National Bank. The parcel here is tax map 37C, group C, parcel 2, and it's located at 2620 Volunteer Parkway. And as Tim stated, a portion of this property is zoned, the predominant amount is zoned B3, but there is a little piece in the back that's zoned R3. The map on the next slide here shows the entirety of the parcel. And what this map is showing you right here is that there is a good portion of the property that's impacted by the flood zone. So the pink color indicates open floodway. So that's the area that's very, very difficult to build in. The blue indicates the 500-year flood zone. So that is an area where you can build, but just wanted to show you that a good portion of this parcel is impacted by that flood zone. The next map shows the zoning of the area. And again, that parcel that we're talking about tonight, the entirety of the parcel is hatched in red. But if you look close, you can see that the back is shaded to match the R3 of the townhomes behind. The portion, the predominant portion that fronts on Volunteer Parkway is zoned B3, which is indicated by the pink color.
Yes, and Sheriff, if I could just jump in 1 second. Of the total property, the acreage, 1.68 acres is currently zoned B3, and 0.77 acres is zoned the R3. So, like I said, the majority of the property is currently zoned B3, as you can see the portion in the pink there. Thank you, Sheriff.
Okay, so if we go to the next slide, this will just show a view of the existing and vacant motel that exists on the B3 portion of the site. The road here, the intersection, this is Winter Circle, which goes back to the multifamily units in behind that are zoned B3. The next slide shows just a chart that shows that existing zoning and existing land use. So again, you've got R3 and B3 right here in this area, all the B3, of course, located along the Parkway. You've got the vacant motel buildings, the existing use on our subject site. You've got multifamily residential in behind. You've got some commercial uses located to the south, and then some residential uses to the west. The next slide shows, and this one maybe depending on how big you have your screen set, shows the permitted uses allowed in the R3 and B3 districts. So this is important to consider as you consider a rezoning decision, because any of these uses that are listed would be permitted in the B3 zone once and if this is rezoned. So the R3 district at the top of the left-hand side of the screen shows that permitted uses are any uses permitted in the RM district. You can do duplexes, you can do multifamily residential units at 13 units per acre. You can do zero lot line developments, assisted living facilities, and then you can do the uses by special use permit that are allowed in the RM district. So those are your churches, schools, and some of those private club and sports facilities that you all have looked at some in the past. The B3 district starts on the bottom left-hand side of the screen. So this is going to include all those uses that we have in our general business zone. So most of the corridor uses, you can do all of your retail, restaurant, you can do animal clinics, auto sales. There's a wide variety of commercial uses in the general business zone. If you go to the next slide, Tim, thank you. This is our future land use map. So this is that excerpt of the future land use map that we always look at when we consider rezonings. This indicates there is converging future land use classifications in this area. So the pink zone indicates commercial. The orange indicates high density residential. So this is a converging area on this parcel. And so we look at this and we're supposed to consider all these converging land uses. And then we look at the policies that might support a rezoning decision. So listed here on your screen are policy 3 and 6, which would support the rezoning request here. So policy 3 is to sustain existing commercial areas while providing for adequate and compatible growth and expansion, provide for the continued growth and expansion of commercial corridors in particular. Policy 6 states to encourage the redevelopment of underutilized land and buildings to capitalize on existing infrastructure and services, and to encourage the redevelopment of underutilized buildings and properties. So for these reasons, the staff's recommendation tonight to the Planning Commission is for a positive recommendation that would go to the Bristol City Council to consider at their next meeting. And this recommendation is based on the commercial zoning of the subject parcel that's already in place and is the majority zone present on the site. And it also combines with the commercial corridor and the fact that this is located on Volunteer Parkway. Also would cite that policy 3 and policy 6 that I just read on the previous slide. So in summary, the recommendation from staff to the Planning Commission is for a favorable recommendation to City Council.
Thank you very much. While we do have visitors involved that are not normally at our meetings, want to give the logistics of how we will go about this. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to have the Planning Commission question the staff about various aspects of this. Then after we do that, we will then turn to the audience and we're going to ask the developers to speak first. And then after they have spoken, anybody else that wants to address this issue, we will allow them to speak, whether they're for it or against it. However, before we get started, Dr. Webb has a little announcement that he makes anytime we do a rezone. Dr. Webb.
Anytime we do consider rezoning, the Planning Commission will look at everything and we'll decide whether we want to forward this on to City Council with a favorable recommendation or an unfavorable recommendation. We do not rezone.
And this will go in front of City Council at their next council meeting, which will be the first Tuesday of next month. Am I correct on that?
Yes, that will be, if you recommendation either way will be in front of City Council on September 1st at their meeting for first reading.
And the other thing that Planning Commission always takes into consideration on a rezone is not necessarily the use that a potential buyer has. It is a rezone to the zoning that has been proposed, and any and everything that is included in that zoning is what it could be. We're not rezoning to a particular use, we're rezoning it to a particular zone. So we have the list in front of us of potential projects that could happen, and what we decide is whether or not that's a good idea for that particular piece of property. Now, all that being said and done, if anybody in the Planning Commission has questions of staff, let's go.
What is the percentage of usable area on this piece of property? Anybody know?
Well, looking at the flood mapping, you notice that there's pink
Mhm.
colored. That means it's in the 100-year flood fringe. So as long as they elevated that property or flood proofed any proposed development, they could build in that flood fringe. You do notice there is a creek that runs
Mhm.
probably along the property line, possibly would be my guess. So there is some area right here with the creek, but in general, just looking at it, I would say probably a good 85% developable.
Tim and Sheriff, what's the width of that Winter Circle Road going into the motel?
If I recall, it's at least 24 feet wide, and it is a private street, a private driveway for the condominium development in the back.
Yes, sir.
I would assume at some point, the owner, the previous owner of the property asked for the rezoning in 2003 with the intent to continue developing the condos. I don't know that that's relevant to the discussion today, but I noticed there's what appears to be a hedgerow or a screen that's on that northern. Is that just coincidental, or was that required based upon what was approved at the time for the rezoning to B3? Actually, the R3 is down below that, I believe.
Yes, let me go back to but you can see it better on this shot, but don't take them, as y'all well know, when we show the property lines, they're actually tax parcel lines. So don't take them to be exact, but this row of the landscaping right here in this area was part of the development required landscaping of this condominium section. So I would say that's on the condominium property and not this property. Should anything develop on the B3 property just here or anywhere else, then they have to meet the appropriate screening requirements between the R3 and the B3. So there would be some screening, any development on this parcel, the Sunset Motel parcel. They would have to do additional screening should they develop to take care of the residential piece, multifamily piece here. But you are correct. I'll go back to this slide here. At one point, it was the previous owner had wanted to put a row of condos in this section here that's zoned R3. So at that time, they requested that rezoning to be R3. And subsequently, through the development process, they combined this and made this one tract of land again, and just didn't change the rezoning at that time that they put it back. But before, it was zone B3 at some point previously. And I think that history was in your packet. I think we included that.
So at one point there was an intention to have that R3 section developed with condos. The previous owner abandoned that prior to the release of the property?
Yes, the previous owner never moved forward with development of that portion. And then after that, they replatted the property lines. If I can remember what they said, the history of it, replatted the property to encompass that R3 portion again back into what was B3. Just never requested changing the zoning at the time they made the parcel to the current boundaries of it.
Based upon the 0.77 acres that is left in the R3 zone, good to know that it was replatted, but is there any possibility at this point of a present or future owner developing that? The topography back there is pretty, there's an incline there. Looks like it would be hard to develop another condo unit in that section with the topography that's there.
It could be, and that would be a question to ask the current owner better than I.
Okay.
But there is some challenging topography there in that rear portion. And that might have been another reason the previous owner didn't move forward with that. And it could have been, it hit also at the time of the recession that he was building these. I mean, there's several factors that weighed in, I'm sure, to make that decision back years ago.
And I understand the purpose of rezoning and the potential use for the property beyond what the intended use is by the present owner. But I would like at the appropriate time to hear the owner, the present owner, indicate why they are requesting this rezoning, what the advantages are to them and the reasoning for doing so.
Yes, sir. You can, they are online, and when Mr. Chairman, after these questions, I think he'll give them an opportunity to ask them questions.
Other questions for our staff?
Yeah, Tim, you said that Winner's Circle is privately held?
That is a private access way. It is not a public street or a publicly built street at this point. Or a street up or a private street built to a public standard, I guess is a better way to say that.
And it is on private property?
Yes, sir.
So, hey, Tim, when we do these mixed zoning, how is that recorded in the deed? Is it or not? I mean, basically I'm asking, is that black line that delineates B3 to R3, that's not really well defined, is it?
No, those typically the zone is not recorded in the deed. It'd be the boundary of the property.
Yeah, okay.
The deeds typically don't refer to the zones at all. Council, when they rezoned this, would have put some kind of meets and bounds description in to show where the zone was going. And so then there would have had to be staff work to actually pinpoint where the zones are.
Yes.
Yeah, no, exactly. Oh, go ahead, Tim.
Previously, this line right here, like I said, that was part of the development of the residential portion back in the back. Subsequent or after that, the property line was changed, but not the zone line. So previously the zoning match up with this black line right here that shows the zoning line currently. And then once again, if this was a portion of it. Can't remember if all of it previously was zone B3, but there was a portion of it that was zone B3, and they had to request the residential zone. They requested the residential zoning of it. So
yeah, no, I mean I was just clarifying, but this is the reason why I really don't like parcels that are mixed zone. It's a nightmare to figure out what should be where and everything else. It should be clean. The whole parcel should be one zone. That's my opinion on things like that. So, okay, good, thanks.
Tim, just a curious question. The property to the right of the road going in there, does it have the same ownership as the current property that's been requested for rezoning?
Fred Clellan might be able to answer that better than I can, but I think so, but I think he could answer that.
Yes, I can answer that question. It also belongs to Val Valley National Bank. That's actually one parcel with the split zoning in the back of the subject property we're talking about.
What additional questions do we have for staff? Hearing none, following the procedure as outlined, we will now turn to the developers for any comments. And when you do speak with us, give us your name and address, please. Fred, do you want to go first?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name's Fred McClellan. I reside in Abingdon, Virginia. I represent the property owner, Powell Valley National Bank. I am a realtor. And our reason for addressing this is because the split zoning that is on this property has been an impairment. Powell Valley became the owner of the property through a foreclosure process. And I have been marketing the property for them. We had a qualified buyer. We were under a purchase agreement, and through the due diligence period and going to the city to explore the use and the split zoning requirements, they determined that that property was not usable for them at all under the R3, could not even park vehicles back there, and that ended up terminating the purchase agreement. As a result, Powell Valley sees and considers this split zoning to be an impairment of the B3 zoning that is the primary use on both of those parcels on the front Volunteer Parkway. And that is the reason they're making a request of the zoning commission to make a unified zoning of B3.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Presley, do you have anything to say? Evidently, he's probably not even on here. All right. Then what we will do is we would like to hear from other people who are here to address this. Tim, do you have them to come to the microphone, or how are you going to handle it, sir?
Yes, Steve Blankenship will bring them one at a time if they wish to speak to the public comment computer. If you'll give him 1 second, and I'll go make sure what's going on, but he'll bring them there. Hold on.
Mr. Chairman, this is Larry Presley. I'm sorry, I had a temporary thing. Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you to the commission and staff for hearing our request for this zoning, and we'll be glad to answer any questions. Again, my name's Larry Presley. I'm Executive Vice President of Powell Valley National Bank, and I reside in Jonesville, Virginia.
Thank you, sir. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Presley? All right, then we will move on to the
First
public.
will be Dawn Warren to speak to you, and she should be firing up the computer, turning the video and audio on.
She'll be showing up under the public comment box.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, if I could add too, I think I left this out in my initial presentation, but we did receive 5 comment forms back from what we mailed out to the adjacent property owners, and all those forms are included in your all's packets. But there are 5 letters at the back of the packet information on this topic, and all of those are in opposition to the rezoning request.
All right. Dawn, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
We're very good. Here's what we'd like you to do, if you don't mind. Give us your name and address for the record, and then the floor is yours.
Okay. My name is Dawn Warren, and my address is 336 Ridgetop Drive, Bluff City, Tennessee, which is actually in the city limits of Bristol as well. I own 4 properties in Winter Circle, and so I'm just really here to try to protect my investment. Obviously, we don't want something coming in there that's going to lower the value of our property. And I know I speak for, a couple other homeowners that, agree, according to the forms that were sent back, that we're just trying to represent ourselves as want to be informed and want to be included as to what goes in there.
All right. Does anybody on the Planning Commission have a question of Dawn?
It may be irrelevant to the discussion and the consideration, but just for my information, is there any covenants and restrictions that apply to the property where the condos sit?
There is a homeowners association, and obviously there are bylaws and codes that go along with that.
Thank you.
And when we bought our property, my husband and I bought our properties probably over the last 18, 19 years. The original developer, I do believe, wanted to put another row of condos there where that piece of property in question is. And I guess it just fell through. They just didn't make it through the recession, like you said, and didn't pan out. But as far as the complex it's finished, and there are 35 units in Speedway Estates.
On the road that goes into those units, do you know if there's any restriction, because it is a private drive, do you know if there's any restrictions as far as ingress, egress off of that road to the two pieces of property that it splits?
That I am not sure of.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, it does have cross-access easements rights.
So any development of either one of those properties would have the right to use Winter Circle and then cut off to a driveway?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Are there any other questions for Dawn? Dawn, we very much appreciate you coming in and under these unusual circumstances and talking with us.
Well, thank you for hearing me out, and I hope that you'll keep us informed and keep us in the loop as to what happens with this property, because obviously we have a substantial investment here.
I understand. Did you hear the announcement that Dr. Webb made about the fact that we don't rezone?
I did.
Okay. That anything that we say or do goes to city council next month, one way or the other.
Exactly.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, ma'am.
I might have not been paying close attention, but if our planners could talk, if they didn't already, about the buffering between B3 and the R3, that might be helpful for folks who are in the condos to understand what does happen when development, different zonings abut each other.
So we do have buffering requirements when you have commercial against residential and multifamily against single family and duplex residential. So there are buffer requirements that would have to be followed to develop the property. We have a matrix we use that's in the zoning ordinance. Everybody can see it, and it tells you, basically you look at the matrix, it tells you what level of buffering you have, and then you go to look at that level of buffering, and there's several options under each of those levels of buffering that would be required. I hope that answers your question, Margaret.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's critical with understanding what happens. And that would be the same against the property line, regardless of whether we move it or not, those requirements would be required, correct?
Correct. I mean, the portion, the 1. Currently there's 1.68 acres zoned B3, even without the rezoning request. If somebody developed that 1.68 acres, we would require them to put buffering between the existing R3 property and that business property. And that would be even without the rezoning request.
Tim, did I hear you earlier say that the property's been replatted for inclusion of the R3 and the B3?
Just my recollection is that originally the residential portion was down at the property line where it's split zoned right now. That used to be the original property line. And at some point when they found that they weren't going to be able to develop the residential piece, they moved the property line to its current location back here, but never requested the rezoning. And staff at that time, whatever staff was here at that time, didn't think about but we should also look at rezoning the piece at that time. That would have been, like Scott said, that makes more sense to not have the split zone there.
All right, we do have one other person. I have Steve Hicks. Who do we have?
Yes, let me check real quick. Hold on. Mr. Hicks is sitting down at the computer, so it'll be just 1 second here and he'll be online. Okay, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Hicks is online.
Thank you, Mr. Is it Hicks or Hick?
Hicks, H-I-C-K.
Hicks. Made a bad note, didn't have the S. Mr. Hicks, if you do not mind, give us your name and address, and then after you do that, the floor is yours.
Okay, my name is Stephen Hicks. I do live at 112 Winter Circle, C6.
All right. Floor is yours.
Well, I do oppose this. You know, I don't know what kind of businesses are expected. I haven't seen the list that you presented a while ago. I don't know what kind are required or that would go in there, but you know, we have a quiet little neighborhood other than on some nights because of 423 Social across the street. You know, like bike night, there's all kind of motorcycles coming in there all hours of the night. Like for it to stay quiet right there in our little patch of neighborhood. We do take care of ourselves. And, you know, even with the trees right there in the R3 section that you was talking about going up the hill, it ain't gonna keep off all the light. You know, again, like I say, it's quiet for the most part, but like to keep it that way.
Mr. Beavers, would you address lighting requirements?
Yes, sir. The lighting requirement for any development, once again, whether it's rezoned or not, if they develop the portion of the B3 currently, they would have to only allow a ½ candle at the property line here for light. So it'd be a ½ candle would be allowed there. Along the right of way, it'd be 2 candle. So there are lighting requirements at the property lines for developments. Basically ½ candle when it abuts residential, 2 candle when it abuts anything else.
All right.
Yeah.
Mr. Hicks, is there anything else that you want to say or ask?
And as old as the old Sunset Motel is, again, I remember me and Rick growing up, but I mean, there's enough groundhogs per se and rats and everything else that's around that area, and plus what's coming in on the creek. You know, I've known it to flood right there in that area, right there off the creek. But again, tearing it down, we're gonna have problems coming up with additional rodents. So you know, they can't take care of that, whatever goes in there.
All right.
Again, as Ms. Warren said, you know, I'm considering buying one of the condos there, renting it right now, but again, I'd hate for it to go down in value.
We understand that. All right. Are there any other questions, thoughts, or comments from Mr. Hicks? Mr. Hicks, again, we very much appreciate you coming. Whatever we do tonight, it goes to City Council next month.
Yes, sir.
whether we send a favorable or unfavorable. It goes in front of city council next month.
Yes, sir. I understand, sir.
All right. Thank you for coming in. We appreciate everything you had to go through, and it's not the way we normally do it, but it's what we got to do.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, we'll bring it back to the Planning Commission. Are there any questions that we now have for staff? Is there a motion?
Before we make a motion, Chairman,
Yes, sir.
just like to make a comment if it's appropriate. You know, and hearing all the comments, they're all very valid. One of the things that I would be concerned if this does not move forward would be that the state of the current property that's there now, the old motel. It's a blighted area, subject to be potential lot of transients coming in and out of there. So it has some concerns as well. Hopefully that if there's some development's going to go on, that it has that potential of maybe improving the property values in that area, not hurting the property values. But I do have concern about the existing property that sits there now, though.
All right.
Okay.
Tim, by any chance, is this in a redevelopment district?
Right.
No, sir, it is not.
And another question, Tim, is this perchance, I don't think it is, I'm 90% sure, one of the areas that our economic development and planning staff has looked at along Volunteer Parkway for mixed use, et cetera?
No, that study stopped down at the Walmart, Beaver Creek, right below the Walmart property, the Century Boulevard.
Thank you.
I just want to echo what Mayor Luttrell had to say about the condition of the old motel. I went by there just to see more than the map shows, and I was quite frankly appalled at the condition of the backside of that motel. There are no doors. It looks like anybody or anything can come and go as it pleases into that building. If I was a resident of those condos, I would want to see something done to improve the property in comparison to what its current state is.
Tim, question for you. Has the Better Property Board looked at this building?
No, sir, but I've made a note to have our codes department go and inspect it. So I will put that on their radar tomorrow for them to go look at the property and make a determination if it needs to be bought in front of the Better Property Board.
All right, folks, any other questions or comments before we do a motion? Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
We have a motion to accept the staff's recommendation. Is that correct, Margaret?
Yes, thank you very much. That's better said.
I will second it.
And Dr. Webb said he's seconding. So the motion is, as I look at staff's recommendation, Bristol Regional Planning Commission sent a favorable recommendation to the City Council. So that is your motion that is on the floor. Is there any discussion for the motion that's on the floor?
I'll just say that I think it can improve with development, but also I understand the concerns of the residents. I think buffering the requirements help that, but it is a little bit difficult because those condos go up the hill. So therefore they are a little exposed with any buffering, and also exposed for noise transference from across the street, et cetera. So understand that, and that's unfortunate, but that could happen with or without this rezoning. And I think it will be an improvement if it can develop.
Any other comments to address the motion that's on the floor?
Yeah, I'd say that this is Scott. I said I'm not a fan of multi-zones in a single parcel, and this is the reason why. It's a giant mess. You heard that they can't sell it because whoever wants to buy it, they're going to look at it for whatever they want to do. And if you tell them, well, no, you can't do it on some part, which is not clearly defined, it's going to be hard to sell it. And if it's going to be hard to sell it, it's hard to find somebody to redevelop it. So, and as to the B3, I mean, that's what this parcel is. That we're not taking houses and designing them as B3. It's just correcting an error, in my opinion, that was done. And quite frankly, R3 is a transition zone from business to residential, and that's where it is. So I'm going to vote in favor of it.
This is Jason. I was compelled to vote no prior to this meeting and prior to seeing the property today. And I look at the history of the property, B3 to R1A to R3, and then back to B3 in the front, and considering the Volunteer Parkway and perhaps an oversight on city staff when this was replatted and it became a mixed zoned property. I wouldn't want to buy the property with its current zoning status. I wouldn't want to develop that property with its current zoning status. And I think we want property to be developable and usable. And I do sympathize with the property owners in the rear, but when you consider the Volunteer Parkway and everything that is there, and the fact that the zoning that's adjacent to Volunteer Parkway would allow for anything in the B3 anyway, we're only talking about 0.77 acres of the total 2.45. I will be in support of the motion.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else want to address the motion that's on the floor? The motion is to send a favorable recommendation to City Council. Roll call.
Kelly Graham,
Yes.
Malin Luttrell,
Yes.
Joel Staton is yes. Jason Boer,
Yes.
Kevin Buck,
Yes.
Scott Gaynor,
Yes.
Takai Shu,
Yes.
Mark Webb,
Yes.
Margaret Firerobin.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
I believe that was an unanimous vote.
Yes, sir.
All right. We want to thank everybody for participating from the public on this. Residents and developers, we thank you very much for putting up with the system this month. Thank you. Sullivan County rezoning request.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, up next for consideration is a rezoning request for Highway 126 and 2nd Street area. This is the current site, and I hope I don't mispronounce the last name very badly, but Shown Trucking on Highway 126. Most of y'all know where that parcel is. We do have in attendance John Mize, the surveyor for the property owner, and it looks like Tommy Shown. So they're here at the annex, and they will be using the public comment computer at the appropriate time. So with that, I will let Ms. Young give the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Beavers. So tonight's rezoning recommendation request for this property is to go from R1 and B3 to M1, and this is Sullivan County zoning. So this is a property that's within Bristol's urban growth boundary. And so what that means, as the Planning Commission tonight considers this, is whatever the recommendation is of the Planning Commission will be forwarded to the Sullivan County Commission for their final vote and consideration. So the recommendation will come straight from the Planning Commission in Bristol to the Sullivan County Commission. And that will be, I believe, in their September meeting. So the owners requesting the rezoning tonight's Tommy and Sheila Shown. The location's 2224 2nd Street and 1247 Highway 126. This is tax map 36 parcel 1 and tax map 36C group C parcel 47. And just one more time, the request is to go from an R1, which is a low density single family residential district, and B3 general business services district to the Sullivan County M1 light manufacturing district. So the next map has a location map that shows the parcel here on Highway 126. So the long parcel here is where most of the trucking business is located right now. So that's the parcel that we're identifying on Highway 126. And then there's a smaller secondary parcel that Tim is kind of highlighting right now that's zoned with a residential zoning. So that's also part of this rezoning request tonight. The next map shows the zoning in the area. So you do have quite a few zoning districts, zoning classifications here in this area. But again, that long parcel has the B3 R1 split, another split zone here. And then the smaller residential parcel has that zoning as well. Or the residential zoning, I'm sorry, I should say. So those are the parcels, zones, the zone information. That's the parcels in question we're looking at tonight. The next slide has a chart that shows that existing zoning in the area and then the existing land use. So again, you saw on the map, there's quite a bit of different zoning classifications around in this area. It's all Sullivan County, all urban growth boundaries. So you've got B3, you've got R1 as the predominant zoning classifications. You'll note you don't see any M1, which is the request tonight. You don't see any of that in that immediate area. The existing land use, of course, on the parcel in question is a trucking company. And then you've got residential surrounding and a residential trailer park surrounding. And then there is a restaurant located across the street. So if you'll go to the next slide, Tim, here we have a summary of permitted uses. And again, the reason to look and consider these is once this property is rezoned, if for some reason the trucking company would move out, whatever the zoning is in place would allow these permitted uses. So your R1 category is going to allow single family detached dwellings. It's going to allow some administrative services, libraries, essential public transport, utility communication uses. It's going to allow substations and commercial golf courses and agricultural uses. And these are summarized lists. This is not the entire list from the Sullivan County zoning ordinance. B3, you're going to see the introduction of some of the kind of commercial corridor type uses, banking, retail, professional services and office buildings, restaurants, self-storage, mini warehouses. So your more corridor business uses. And then if you go over and look at the M1 category, this is where you're going to get into some of your manufacturing uses. So you can do limited, general, basic industrial manufacturing, and ordinance does have some supplemental provisions you have to meet to do these uses, but you're going to have your manufacturing uses, some animal care and vet services, some automotive parking, self-storage, mini warehouse storage, and then warehousing goods, transport, and storage as an additional use. So you've got a range here of uses going from the R1 residential to the M1, which is the request tonight. If you go to the next slide, you'll see these are just a couple photos of the site. On the left, of course, the trucks there on the Highway 126 parcel. And then on the right, 2224 2nd Street, you can see that it's just a wooded area right now. That parcel does have road frontage on a platted street, but the street has not been extended in front of that parcel. So it is vacant there on 2nd Street. The next slide shows the future land use map. So this is another one where you have a bit of a split here. You have the pink commercial classification that goes down Highway 126. the lighter yellow in the back is going to indicate low density residential. So like with the last parcel, you need to consider all of these uses as they converge here on this parcel. However, this one is unique as opposed to the last one because the rezoning the subject parcels here doesn't agree with the map. Also, there is no M1 zone in that area. So if you go to the next slide, Tim, I'll talk just a little bit more about this. Rezoning that entire parcel to M1 would introduce the manufacturing zone and all those manufacturing uses that are allowed in that zone into that residential area, which again, it might not be a big deal right now as the trucking company has been operational there for many years. But if in the future that business did leave, then any of those manufacturing uses could backfill on that property. As a second item, as staff considered this rezoning request, we would suggest that it is a spot zoning for a couple reasons. Again, that M1 zone is a use classification that's different from anything in that surrounding area. So if you think back on that zoning map, you didn't see any M1 zone present in that area. It is inconsistent with the future land use plan that has all of that low density residential shown off Highway 126. And then one of the reasons that something is considered a spot zone is if the reason for the rezoning request is for the sole benefit of the property owner, which is what we would suggest is the case here. So the staff recommendation to the Planning Commission that tonight is to send an unfavorable recommendation to Sullivan County on the request here. And the reasons that we would cite to send an unfavorable recommendation is that rezoning these properties to M1 does not align with the zoning or use of surrounding properties, that the M1 zoning disagrees with that future land use map, which projects low density residential for much of that area and commercial use in the rest, and that we feel that this rezoning request would qualify for spot zoning, which is not something that we would want to recommend for. With that, I would be happy to answer any questions that you all might have. And like Tim said, we do have representatives in the annex tonight to represent the project.
Again, our logistics on this, we're going to discuss this with staff, then we'll bring in the owners of the property for discussion, and then we'll bring it back to the Planning Commission for any motions. So what questions do we have of staff? The question I've got in reading the narrative, Ms. Talbert discusses that, yes, in fact, they are grandfathered, but she is obviously in favor of this rezone. Can you give us some explanation, a little further detail as to why she would be in favor of it?
In speaking with her, I think that this represents an attempt to clean up and to justify some of the zoning to match the use to the zone. It also, if you look into her zoning ordinance, if you have a manufactured zone that abuts the residential, you have some greater setback requirements. So I think that in a way, this would, for this particular use, if they choose to expand, could protect the neighborhood in terms of having greater setback requirements for the M1 zone. The flip side of that, of course, is if, again, this business would move out and you would have another user come in, this business may not have a lot of impact in terms of noise, smell, different materials on site. You might not have that in this instance, but you wouldn't know and you couldn't predict in a future case. So again, you just have to consider all those M1 uses that could come in the future. So I think it's a cleanup situation of the kind of the split zone, the use that's there doesn't match with that zone in place, and then an attempt, you'd have a greater setback should they expand.
Other questions?
Mr. Chairman, I'm a little bit confused on the zoning map there, showing the red lines, and right there where the word split is, to the left of that, it seems like, yeah, right there and above. Is that part of the Sham property too?
No, sir, that's just the way the layer feeds into the GIS. The hatched in red area and this piece over here are all the property owners own. This is the somebody else's property right here.
How do they access it?
There's a driveway right here.
Okay, what about the part north of that, the section north of
I think it goes all the way back to that property.
Okay, so that,
but that's separate, and this might be a landlocked piece for all I know. I don't know the history of that. But
I was just wondering if that was part of the Sham property, why it wasn't included, but it evidently is not.
correct. The orange color is the B3 zone, current B3 zone. The yellow color and the lighter yellow transparent color are both R1 zones, just for some clarification there. But the red hatched is all the Shones property there.
Okay.
Mark, to answer your question, I'm looking at it over here on Google Earth. That driveway that goes in swings around to the right and goes all the way to the back.
Okay. So it feeds all three of those pieces right there.
It does.
Yeah. And I believe that piece is actually the mobile home park.
It is.
Oh yeah. Okay. I see it now. Okay. That top piece, I couldn't see anything going into it, but.
So my understanding is the trucking business that's owned by the Showns pre-existed zoning in the county. And so any activity on the property, despite the present zoning, is non-conforming but grandfathered. So it begs the question, if they can continue to operate the trucking business as is in the R1 and the B3, why would you want to subject it to a higher setback standard unless there's some other business they're wanting to develop? So I guess that's a question for the Showns when they actually speak of why they would want to go to a more stringent setback than they have currently.
Also, just a reminder, and I think our chairman said it at the beginning, anytime we do a rezoning, it can be interesting to find out what owners want to do with the property, but we need to be prepared that it is the right zoning for anything that is allowed on that property. There's been times in the past where a rezoning has happened and then the property changes hands and something else is developed. So just note that that's always what we need to consider. And my assumption, also just clarification, my assumption is the front part of the property can, as long as they own it, it can continue operating as it is today.
Right. That's my understanding. It's a non-conforming use, but it would certainly be allowed to be used as long as they're there.
All right. What other questions do we have at this time? All right, then let's bring in the property owners. And if any questions we have for them or anything they want to say.
Yes, sir. They're heading back to the public comment computer.
Thank you very much.
The first person, Mr. Chairman, will be John Mize, the surveyor, the professional representing the property owner.
Thank you very much. Mr. Meyer, is it Myers?
Mize.
Mize.
Yes.
Mize, M-I-Z-E.
All
I'm
right.
John Mize. I'm the surveyor on this project and helping out Mr. Shams on this building project. Also, I reside at 690 Cross Community Road in Bluntville.
Thank you, sir.
What just kind of give you a little bit of a rundown on why we're trying to do all this is it's simply on if you had the aerial photography back up, Tim, their main maintenance building that you can see is right next to the little bitty piece of R1 that's right. That's the main maintenance building. He's wanting to put a side building on that to expand his maintenance. And it's going to be 40 foot wide by about 60 or 80 foot long. And the only reason we got into this process is we can't get a building permit because it's too close to that existing property line. And so therefore, we're having to try to de-subdivide, take in all of his properties, which he bought the little small piece there on 2nd Street. He bought that in 2016, November 17th. The main property is in actually 3 tracts that was bought. 2 tracts were bought in 1977. And the 3rd tract, which includes where their office is on the left, was bought in 1985. So we're trying to clean up a whole lot of stuff, and trying to clean up, get those old 3 tracts without any property lines in the middle, so it might bring up any future setbacks or whatever by deed lines. Also to take in this new R1, that one lot on 2nd Street that Mr. Shams brought in 2016, and bring that into the whole picture of things, just reunite the whole project. And it was Amber, in talking with Amber Torbett, we originally sent our request in June the 12th to just put everything B3 as it was in the front section, trying to get away with that split zoning problem we always have. And then in looking at it a few weeks later with Amber Torbett, she would not extend us a building permit for our little 40 by 60 because it has to be an M1 to be able to comply. So that's why we're going through all this big process to just put on, just essentially to get rid of a setback on property that he already owns. The property use now is non-compliant to the B3 zone, as your staff has talked about. That M1 is what Ms. Torbett suggested that we go for. So then we changed our rezoning request, and delayed a month on that. The R1 section in the back, okay, that part back there, it has no road frontage at all. All access is through the B3. And then the trailer park that's next to us, y'all were talking about that road. Part of it is county maintained, just barely into the property. The rest of it is a private street. The 2 parcels behind that you're talking about, that's kind of a lightish green back there, yeah, right in there, Tim, that their access is by easement through the trailer park. So they don't have road frontage either, technically. So, you know, if we keep it R1 and it has to be split like that, then in the future, we can't use that property back there without the road frontage. So, you know, we're trying to clear up a whole bunch of different things. And the photograph that was shown of the 2nd Street property, okay, it's under all this. You see the rail fence in the front. That's a separate lot. That's not the lot that we're concerned with. Ours is all in the very back. It's a very narrow lot, about 90 feet wide by maybe 150, 200 foot long. That's on this platted street, but was never developed by the county, never maintained. Yeah. So your picket fence looking thing was out at the very first at 6th Street and 2nd. So, and then, you know, I'd like to just entertain any questions y'all might have.
Questions?
Yeah, the rest of the property back in the R1 area, is it just mainly for storage of trailers, or
yes,
is there anything being done on that?
With this picture on the screen now, you can see that the trailer storage and spare parts and stuff of that nature extends back about halfway through the R1 section. There's also the natural gas line goes across the top where the indention starts to coming in. That's a natural gas line, so that kind of splits it up. But the rest of it is right now is in residence by 2 horses, and that's all that's back there.
So that could be usable property,
Yes, sir.
but only as a residential area at this time.
Well, at present zoning, without residential, without road frontage, so it'd be hard to split it up into lots without the recommended road frontage.
Yeah.
What are the questions? Does anybody have any questions for the owner of the property?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Schoen would like to speak.
Very good.
Okay, thank y'all.
Thank you.
Okay.
Dave, you can just leave it on.
Okay.
While he's coming in, refresh my memory. The request is for manufacturing for the entire piece, right?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Rezone the R1 and B3 and the R1, the little lot here, all to M1.
All right, thank you. Hi there, if you do not mind, give us your name and address, please.
Tommy Shown, 356 Tipton Lane, Bluntville, Tennessee.
Floor is yours.
What I'd like to say is that vacant lot that we're talking about that I bought next door, there used to be a mobile home on it. And they would, was more or less just used for drugs. They'd be in and out there all the time. And the people that owned it, I'm not even sure their name right now, but they got down to taking the siding off the trailer and taking it to the scrap yard and selling it. I mean, they finally got down to they couldn't live in it. And that's when I approached them and bought the land, and they finally just sold the rest of the trailer for metal. That's how bad a shape it was in. And what we're doing, I mean, we're not trying to go over on that land, that vacant lot. But if I put a 40 by 80 or 40 by 60 building in, it goes right to the edge of that lot, and it does not have this setback. I mean, that's our only problem that we're trying to do, is use that vacant lot for a 10, 12-foot setback.
Do we have any questions?
Come on, give me a question.
As in, bring it on.
Right on. I guess what I'm trying to say is, even though it's a trucking company, the lot's in better shape now than it was 4 or 5 years ago when I bought it.
All right. Regardless of what we say one way or the other today, we do not rezone.
Correct.
We send a recommendation one way or the other to the county commission, and it's up to them.
So the city doesn't have the final say, it's the county, is that right?
It is the county.
Okay.
Tim, you want to address that?
Yes, what planning commission will do tonight is either make a favorable or unfavorable recommendation for the rezoning request to the county commission, and it would be up to the county commission to actually enact or not the rezoning. So as much like the city council enacts zoning for the city, the county commission enacts zoning for anything outside the corporate limits.
Tim, can you also just explain the growth boundary so that why we're have jurisdiction, take this into account when it's in the county?
Yes, we are a regional planning commission, and we have a growth boundary that encompasses both the incorporated part of the city and an unincorporated part of the county. And because you fall inside that growth boundary, our planning commission has jurisdiction over subdivisions and recommendations for rezonings in those areas, but that is the limit of their powers in the growth boundary.
Thank you.
And this is part of our future land use plan, correct?
Yes, sir. The future land use plan's on your screen, and this property is in this vicinity right here. You'll see the pink portion is a business zone or future land use for business, commercial. The yellow portion is for low density residential purposes. So you can see 2nd Street, I think, if I can see the screen, is right here is 2nd Street. So the parcel they're talking about, the little tiny residential parcel, is on the north side of 2nd Street in the R1 or the low density residential future land use portion. So everything south of 2nd Street is recommended for general business, commercial. Again, while it was part of the original presentation, address spot zoning. Sheriff, do you want to address that again, please?
Sure. Do you mind to, yep, there we go. So, so our slide here, the second bullet would outline why we feel this qualifies as spot zoning, which spot zoning is a no-no in our world as far as rezonings go. But our analysis would say that this M1 zoning district is it's a different classification than anything in that area. I think we mapped, it's about 3,000 feet to get to another M zone property. So there's no M zone in this area. So it would be different from anything around there. It's inconsistent with that future land use plan. And then it's a benefit that's a sole benefit to the property owner. It impacts and benefits him with potential negative impact to surrounding property owners that are with the exception right there of along Highway 126 are residential in nature.
So I guess really what you're saying, what we were going to build the metal building for is to put equipment in, tires, motors, things like that. What you're saying really is it'd be better just to leave them laying outside and let it look trashy as you go up and down the highway is what you're really saying. Because we built a building on the other side of the main shop about 5 years ago, and it was the same size building as I'm going to build now. But this one on the other side, it's only the setbacks what's stopping us. I mean, we could build the building and it stay on the business property. But I mean, we just need 10 or 12 feet of that M1.
Yes, the planning commission and the city's planning commission, regional planning commission, we don't delve into setbacks and issuances of building permits in the county. That would be strictly Sullivan County that would delve into that. Like I say, we only look at and consider subdivisions or rezonings as far as being a regional planning commission. Anything other than that would be through the appropriate department in the county or the county commission.
Sheriff, the M zoning designation, M1 zoning designation would be spot zoning, but am I correct that B3 would not be spot zoning?
I don't know that we consider B3 to be a spot zone because you do have B3 present in that area. M1 is just very unique to that area, which you can see on the screen. You do have some B3 and you have some B3 on this property.
Yes, the closest.
Don't have any M1 present.
The closest M1 zone property along the 126 corridor is the TIC Tri-City Investment Casting Company. That would be down this way at the split of where Old Stage Trail comes off. There's a TIC company, TIC, at that split where Old Stage Trail splits off 126. It's about 3,000 feet, 3,100 feet southwest of the current parcel.
That zoning is, say, turned down. What would I be able to put on that piece of property that the extra lot that I bought, what's it be zoned for?
Currently it's zoned R1 and you'd have to discuss that with Ms. Torbert, all the uses. We did have a slide that had some of the uses there in R1 from Sullivan County's zoning ordinance. I don't know if that's all of them inclusive, but that is a highlight of some of the R1 uses that are allowed. This are the B3 uses, just a highlight of what's allowed in the B3 in the county. And then that's the uses, a highlight of what's M1 would allow in the county if the property were rezoned M1. And like I said, for any of the questions regarding these uses, the best ask Ms. Torbett the question.
Okay.
Just a real quick question. The front part of that property now, is it?
What was the question?
The entrance of that property up there right now, is it B3 or is it R1 all the way down?
It's zoned B3 from about 3rd Street. This is 3rd Street.
Okay.
This is 2nd Street. So from about 3rd Street down to 126, it is currently zoned B3. So that ought to give you a sort of a delineation.
Yeah. So if
that right there is the property that's zoned R1 off 2nd Street.
So if, just a question, if he wasn't seeking M1 for that, would B3 be acceptable to put that building on? Or is the setback still an issue?
Mr. Shine, you'd have to answer that. If you know, Ms. Torbett would be the best source for that.
What was the question exactly?
Yeah, if you weren't asking for an M1 zone and left it at B3, would she approve your permit under B3 as it is with the building?
I really don't know on that. I just have to ask her on that. What did you say?
Might be worth a question to ask.
Okay, this is John Mize again. I've talked with Amber Torbett. She's the one that recommended we go to M1 because we could not put this addition on in a B3. So that's the only reason we're here, is trying to get this addition on because she won't allow it in a B3 zone.
So if what you're saying, John, this is Kevin, is that the reason for the M1 zoning is not about setbacks. It is about use of the property.
Well, it started out being back setbacks because we couldn't get it. We have to take out that property line between the R1 and the B3 present day to be able to put our building on, because the setbacks, we have to take that line out to do away with those setbacks. We don't
But
have
you can do that in B3 zone.
Yeah, we could go to a B3 on both of them, but then Ms. Torbett says we can't put our addition in a B3. It has to be M1. That's our dilemma. We're caught between rock and a hard place on that.
But is it the building that is the issue in the B3 versus the M1, or is it the setback difference between B3 and M1?
The setback is driving it, but it's the building in a M1 we can't do.
And it's a building exactly like the one we're putting it next to. I mean, it's same length, same width, everything's the same. Just run out of footage at the property line.
All right, what other questions do we have at this time?
Mr. Chairman, it sounds to me like the setback for a B3 is as restrictive as it currently is now, and the only way you're going to increase or decrease that setback is to go to the M1. I think that's the problem right there.
The only way to
Let me, and I think Sheriff, you can correct me. When we looked at the setbacks in that zone, the B3 zone and the M1 zone had both the same side yard setback, Sheriff, if I recalled.
Yep. Give me 1 second. I'll tell you.
Had a lesser setback than the M1 or the B3, if I recall correctly.
The M1 has a 50-foot front and rear setback, 30 feet on the side. The B3 has 30 across the board. So you still got a 30-foot side setback.
But we have to take that property line out. We have to combine the R1 with the B3 to eliminate that property line so we don't have a setback that close to our existing building. We're not in opposition to the 30-foot side yard setback if we can get the R1 to a B3 or M1, as Amber Torbett says.
Question, John Mize. Can you not combine them even with the zoning as it is, the lot, into the bigger lot?
That's what we were trying to start with. Leave the zoning alone and combine the two, but then we'd still have the R1 on that little bitty piece, and we can't get our building over into that fringe.
Right, it couldn't encroach into the R1.
No.
Okay. But it would cure combining it would cure the setback issue. It just can't encroach the building into R1.
Yes. You know, we can live with the B3 R1 on the main property. That doesn't matter, you know. But it's being able to put this addition on is what we can't do without combining the small R1 with the B3. And then of course,
It sounds to me like there's an alternative solution than going to M1 to your dilemma. The M1 is not the only solution. It may be what is recommended by the county, but it sounds to me like there are other alternatives rather than an M1 zoning.
We would like to entertain those alternatives because we've not seen them yet. Because Amber Torbett says no building addition in a B3. It has to be a M1 to comply. Because see, we're non-compliant to start with, but we're grandfathered in. So this would be a new building, so it has to have a new zone.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, I
Yes.
think we're trying to solve a problem that's outside of our purview. I mean, this is Sullivan County, it's not Bristol. We have a question of should this be rezoned to M1? And it seems like we're spending a lot of time trying to solve a problem we don't have any say in.
Can't disagree. Let's do this. Are there any other questions of the applicant at this point in time? Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion to take staff's recommendation to send an unfavorable recommendation to Sullivan County Commission.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second. It's Scott.
Scott said he seconds. Okay, so the motion is on the floor right now to forward an unfavorable recommendation to the county commission. Is there any more discussion on that?
Yeah, I could see a rezone to the whole thing as B3, but I can't go M1.
So also just for our owners and Mr. Mize, and it is a problem, but as planning commission, we have to look for the use forever down the road. It's not right now, it's not in 5 years, it's really trying to make the best decisions. And that's why we have our comprehensive land use plan that we've worked on, and try to use the best judgment we can. And it's not always fun, and it doesn't always give people what they want, but that's why I've made that motion.
Any further discussion?
I will support the motion based on the M1 request. I understand the dilemma that the property owner is in and what may seem reasonable to them for a solution, and I would like to help them get there, but I do understand and accept the fact that it's beyond the Bristol Planning Commission's reach to do so.
Any other comments? The motion on the floor is to send an unfavorable recommendation to the county commission. Roll call.
Kelly Graham,
Yes.
Malin Luttrell,
Yes.
Joel Staton is yes. Jason Boer,
Yes.
Kevin Buck,
Yes.
Scott Gaynor,
Yes.
Takai Shu,
Yes.
Mark Webb,
Yes.
Margaret Firerobin.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. We appreciate you guys coming in. You are between a rock and a hard place, we understand. But once again, we do not rezone the property. We merely send the recommendation. However, after this meeting, you might want to have another meeting with Ms. Torbert, see if there are other ways that she could recommend going. Anything else on this? Once again, thanks for coming in, guys. City Council updates.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, just to update, as previously mentioned, on second, they had public hearing and second reading were held on two items that you all have looked at as Planning Commission. First, the design standards. We had the public hearing with no comments, and City Council did pass that at their August 4th meeting, that zoning update for design standards for commercial structures. That will be in effect on August 21st, this Friday. It will go into effect. Also, the future land use plan was approved. So what you just saw on the screen is a future land use plan. The next time we'll meet, if we have other rezonings as they come down and you look at the future land use plan, it will be the new future land use plan that had a public hearing with no comment and also passed City Council on second reading and will go into effect this Friday, the 21st.
Tim, when I was talking to you this week on another subject, we were talking about the former Kmart and the property beside it that is also under construction. And you said that under the new design standards, they could not build what they're building. It would have to be different. Could you tell us what would have to be different?
Well, the new design standards for the U-Haul and the universal storage buildings would not allow them to have the rib metal siding, and then they would have to have the appropriate number of architectural features on those structures. So that would be what would change on those structures as currently built under the old standards. So if you looked at them, both the units are the rib metal siding, and then you'd have to add some of those elements. If it's less than 50,000 square feet, you have to add 3 elements on the front and 2 elements on the side, if I remember off the top of my head, Sheriff. And then if it's over 50,000 square foot building, it would have to have 5 architectural features on the front and 3 architectural features on the side. Like I said, the biggest thing that would jump out at me would be the rib metal on those 2 structures as built currently.
And would that also include on the U-Haul structure where they've got some buildings in the parking lot that are now self-storage buildings? That would include those also?
That's what I was referring to. The existing building wouldn't, it has a varying roof line to some degree, but they are not doing major modifications to the existing building externally. So it's not like they're putting that threshold of 50% more square footage on the building. But we were talking about the structures, the independent structures setting out front would have to meet those storage units out front.
Okay, what about the storage structures next door?
That are the universal storage. And once again, the office would be fine. If you noticed on the right-hand side, they have their office and it has some drive-it type, mason, stucco type facade. The units themselves are rib metal, so that would not be allowed currently under the new design standards that become effective Friday. But since they were already under construction and approved, they fall under the old design standards, which really didn't have did not have those requirements, I guess the best way to say it.
Interesting. Okay. Sorry, just I thought that the people in the Planning Commission would, because we always talk about we want a field test when we do something new, and there's kind of a field test on it.
Just also feedback from City Council was very positive about the design standards. I think Malin can weigh in, but some very positive comments about our work on Planning Commission and the staff and the booklet being produced, et cetera. So appreciation.
All right. So that's everything on City Council updates?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Let's get into the discussion on the RE district.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, up next for consideration and discussion and some guidance from Planning Commission would be the RE district and continuing our introduction from last week on clarifying some of the information contained in that district should Planning Commission choose to do so. With that, I will let Sheriff step through, and you might just want to stop at each one of these. I think there are 4 different areas that we identified that's in your packet, and she can step through each one. And then if you want to talk about that particular one and stop, that's fine. If you wanted to go through all 4 and then we can roll back to them and talk about each one individually, it's up to you. But with that, I will let Sheriff proceed with the presentation.
Thank you. So during our last meeting, we of course briefed you all on the BZA decision on 803 Pennsylvania and talked through kind of what they saw and what happened. Gave you all just the rundown of that situation, and asked the question, you know, kind of, do we need to look more into this RE district and consider making some changes? And the discussion during the Planning Commission meeting led us to, yeah, we probably need to kind of look at this some more. So what we have attempted to do is give you 4 bites tonight of what we went through and looked at the language and said, this is the part that either needs to be probably better defined or taken out, or maybe y'all love it as it is. But we're just going to walk through 4 screens of information, and what you'll see on each screen is on the left in italics is the actual section of the zoning ordinance, and the right side of the screen is kind of our feel on it and some options. So each screen, again, we're not getting to the point of absolute solution tonight, but to get a little further guidance from the Planning Commission as far as which direction we should go with these pieces is really what we're looking for tonight. So I'll go, if y'all like, just again 4 screens. So if we can just get through these 4 screens, get some direction from you, then we can continue pushing this you know, on down the line from here. So I'll start with the first one. So on the left, again, this is the zoning, the language, and it talks about the purpose of the established residential neighborhood district is to provide specific lot development standards based on the existing patterns and character of single family and single family duplex neighborhoods developed prior to 1950. This will make existing homes compliant with the zoning ordinance and will promote new construction and additions to existing residences in a manner consistent with the existing neighborhood. So it sounds great, but when you really get into it, as far as from a regulatory perspective, there's some nice words and phrases there, but what we'd like to do is to make it very black, white, succinct, clear as to what this purpose is doing. So the right side of the screen kind of highlights some of those defining terms that aren't really defined. So existing pattern, character, the phrase new construction additions to existing residences in a manner consistent with the existing neighborhood. Again, when you get into, you know, trying to give people the rules, what are we really saying here? So there are a couple options here. So 1, 2, and 3. 1, we add some definitions regarding these terms. By adding those definitions, we may have to add other definitions. So if we add definitions for some of these terms, we may need to look at design standards for residential structures that, that further define what these things mean. So that's option 1. Option 2 is if we don't want to further define these terms, then we minimize that paragraph. So we look at cutting down some of that, some of the more vague terms or ideas in that paragraph. So we pare it down to absolute kind of basic language, regulatory language. And then 3 is y'all love it, we'll leave it alone and go forward. So does anybody have any questions about that section or have any direction as far as which way we should go with this one? again, this is the introductory paragraph to this RE district. So it's nice that in my opinion, it's nice that it alludes to this older style development, but again, you don't want to, it's concerning to have terms that aren't very well defined.
This is Jason. I'm personally in favor of option 2, deleting those non-descriptive terms from the paragraph.
I disagree entirely. The first sentence is, of course, true, and the second sentence is editorial. But there's no but I do agree that there's no regulatory purpose in the paragraphs. But it serves as an introduction to what is suggested by the definitions which need to be added.
This is Hicks. I agree with Kevin, Mr. Buck as well. I do think there needs to be a lot of specificity other than the mention of just 1950. But I think it still needs to be there in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I would have to agree that we need some sort of definitions as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, this is just a preamble. It's talking about what your objectives are. It's not saying you have to have a house that looks exactly like something built in 1946. I mean, I don't understand I'm sure we have that exact same paragraph in something about every single district, B1, A1, R1, that we want, in our zoning codes and in our master plan. I'm sure something like that is in there to maintain the quote character of that zone. That's the point of the zoning ordinance in general. I don't see any regulatory thing in here. If somebody wants to come along and say that means you have to have a house that looks exactly like something that was built in 1946, I'm really hard pressed to understand that, and how anybody could read that as being that.
I actually went back and looked at the other preambles as you referred to them, and I don't see anything similar to any of the other sections, any other zoning preambles. And I would submit that this opening paragraph or this preamble was what led the BZA and drove the BZA to their decision, which I personally disagree with.
Yes, Scott, our entrances to the other residential zones, like R1A, the entrance into that zoning about the permitted uses, it's very minimal. It just says this zone is primarily to accommodate single family dwelling units at a maximum density of 3 units per acre. So that's the way the R1, R1B, R2, and R3 and R4 and 5 are listed. The PRD, you have a little bit more because it's talking about the flexibility of design, because that's what the planned residential development would be used for. So there's a little more there. But really, I have to agree with Mr. Boer that really this is different than most of our zoning regulations when it comes to the zones, the preamble to it. So not weighing in one way or the other than it is different than the other ones.
So maybe
Kelly, you're muted. Kelly, you're muted.
So I'm weighing in before Kelly, but so maybe it can be just, I like to edit. Anyway, the established residential neighborhood district provides specific lot development standards and for neighborhoods developed prior to 1950. And just leave it at that.
It could be that, yes.
Yeah. Hey, I'm going to read section 202 of our zoning ordinance. It's the purpose. The general purpose of this ordinance are to promote the health, safety, and welfare of the city of Bristol, Tennessee. The districts shown on the zoning map of Bristol, Tennessee have been designed after consideration as to the character of each district, its suitability for particular uses, its relation to the general land use plan of the city, and with a view of conserving the value of buildings and encouraging the most appropriate use of land throughout the city, to the end may become a better city in which to live. That sounds like the same thing to me. It talks about the character of each district, right? And then what you're saying is the character of this district is old homes. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've seen that type of preamble in all kinds of stuff. I don't understand how that's a regulatory phrase. So I mean, I just read our purpose. So
yeah, and the preamble does not relieve us of the obligation to actually provide those specific development standards, which we haven't done very well.
I think you go back to the impetus behind this discussion, and that is the BZA's decision. And while I lean towards a deletion, I would be in favor of some definitions. But I think if you start defining every single thing throughout this preamble or this introductory statement, I mean, how thick do you want the zoning ordinance to be? And how confusing do you want it to be? And that's the reason I would support a cleanup, maybe more so than a deletion, and very narrowly define some things than it is now, is because while the language may be prevalent throughout, I don't know, I'm obviously new, but have I ever seen statements in a preamble result in establishing, using existing patterns, that term, resulting in a Board of Zoning Appeals declaring that a setback line is a set to line? And based on my determination and understanding of what happened with the Board of Zoning Appeals, is they use that language of existing patterns to take a setback to a set to. And that's problematic for me.
Jason,
Well,
I believe that's what happened, is that they took the setback line as a build to line. That was my understanding in the meeting, what they were considering.
right. And I mean,
I think
I've
it's
never
hard.
seen anybody do that.
Yeah, I think it's hard for us to regulate against bad faith by the Board of Zoning Appeals, and I say that out loud. That is what I think it was.
Question I've got is, I don't think the deal's over, and I assume that there's going to be a lawsuit involved. Do we want to go ahead and work on this now or not work on this now? Or do we want to wait and see what the legal outcome is from that Board of Zoning Appeals deal?
Well, I believe that it is important that if you all feel it's important, that we go ahead and make, the options are clarify it to whatever clarity you all wish, or leave it as it is. I mean, or somewhere in between. I mean, there's those options. And that's why, when we looked at this and where there's ambiguous language, those are the 4 slides that we've got in here, and the ambiguity, it's just, there's no definition to further refine what those terms mean. So staff's in a bind of, if somebody comes in, well, what's character mean in RE zone? What's existing pattern mean in RE zone? So if there were other developments come in, we are, other than we do have the BZAs, some of the hard, fast rulings that they made regarding to build to and facade, when we looked at it overall, because they didn't really use and cite this section during the BZA meeting, as far as the reason they made the rulings on build to and facade and main entrance. So, but this was brought up by the person who filed the appeal by their attorney. But when we looked at it, we're like, there is nothing there for us to hang our hat on as a staff, you know, because there is no definition for these items. Go ahead, Danielle.
Sorry, if I could weigh in on two things. First of all, you know, there may be litigation coming out of the Board of Zoning Appeals decision, and we don't know what that will, if that will come and how long that will take to resolve. And I think my take is that if there are issues with the zoning ordinance that we feel need to be addressed, that litigation is not going to solve those issues. It would only, you know, address the Board of Zoning Appeals decision. The second point that I would make with regard to the language that's in the RE district is that as Tim pointed out, the applicant's attorney came in and quoted this language to the Board of Zoning Appeals. And what that reminds us is that everything that is in the zoning ordinance is important and will get weight at some point, even things that you may not think are important. So language that you all draft and include in the RE district becomes a turning point far in the future at some point, because somebody's going to look at it and give it the meaning that they want to give it, unless you all have been very clear in what you intend to do. So this language, while it may seem like it's feel-good language or, you know, sort of an overall intent, it is regulatory, even though there's no definitions. It is expressing the intent of Planning Commission at that time, and it is binding at some point. And then the argument is over, what do we mean by that? So if you feel there's ambiguity in this paragraph, then I think you need to address that ambiguity. If you don't feel there's ambiguity, then that's another story.
Mr. Chairman, I'm about to lose my connection. My apologies to.
I think he lost it. All right, let's keep on going.
Do you want to, Mr. Chairman, do you want to look at each item, or do you want to try to zero in on some items, you know, one at a time? I mean, obviously this is not all going to get resolved tonight.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
No, there's no way it will. Folks, how y'all want to go about it? Do you want to have the whole thing presented to us and then talk about it? Or do you want to go over this particular slide first?
I kind of like what we're doing, but stop with this. Don't make a final resolution. Let's look at the next one, and then we come back to solidify any of them. That's my thought.
What we would like to come out of this 4 slides would be some direction for staff to look at if you choose to change language in the RE zone, something that we could start looking at crafting some regulation to meet whatever y'all decide is appropriate. So basically on this slide, like I said, you see 3 options that we have identified staff as clarify some of the terms, get rid of some. I mean, there's obviously in-betweens of all those, but just 3 simple options of add clarity to the definitions, which probably would lead into some design standards. I don't see how it would not for the structures in this zone, because if you're talking about character, we're going to have some design standards for character. You know, what are we looking at for character in a home? Same with patterns. So it's really up to you all. I know it's staff really doesn't have, other than we feel like Danielle, we need clarity because these are binding regulations, and it would help if we did have some definitions, if we were to leave it even like it is, to further define it as a minimum for us.
Tim, I don't know how you would define the character of the neighborhood without taking somebody out there and showing them the neighborhood. You know, if you try to put the character of the neighborhood in words, I think you'd be writing a book. In my opinion,
well,
anybody going in there wanting to add on or build to the character of the neighborhood needs to go visit the neighborhood. That's why I think we ought to leave the paragraph as it is.
Well, you saw the book last month in the historic design guidelines of something that you would have to settle on some sort of design guidelines for the area. You saw the presentation last month about historic design guidelines. So
Yeah, well, I mean, look, it says character of single family and single family duplex neighborhoods. I mean, it's not the character of the house, it's of the neighborhood. I mean, if we want to sit here and parse English and all that, I mean, we can do that till the cows come home. But again, it's a preamble. I mean, we have a preamble in order to form a more perfect union, but nobody's out there, well, you know what? We don't have a perfect union. Constitution's invalid. I mean, preambles state your general purpose. The things that after it are what you use to create that vision. And that's what this is. It's the preamble. And then after that, it talks about the guidelines and the rules. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what you're asking for. If you want, you know, a description of what an existing pattern is, because guess what? There's thousands of different patterns in this neighborhood. So
Respectfully, if that's what you want, then you need to say, don't ignore this paragraph. We're just giving you feel-good instructions. You know, don't take this paragraph into account as you're actually interpreting the regulations, because otherwise it is part of your regulations. There's nothing in here that says don't take into account the statement of purpose. And in fact, the opposite is true. When you're considering regulations in a zoning ordinance, the statement of the purpose of the zoning ordinance is very important. It helps to guide anything that's ambiguous.
So Danielle,
this preamble, the way it's written, makes me feel good. I think it would make anybody feel good. It's warm, it's fuzzy, existing patterns, character, consistent with the existing neighborhood. But even on this commission, we already see a difference of opinion as we're not even defining anything, but considering what the words on the page are. And I just don't think a zoning ordinance should be about making people feel good. It should be definitive. It should establish conclusively, as Sheriff was saying earlier, with some resolution, what is allowed, what is not allowed, what the rules are, what the rules aren't. Tim, not to just continue to debate something for the sake of arguing the point, and that preamble of the Constitution is often debated, as we all know, but I would suggest that you define to what you determine the definitions need to be, without going through a lot of work and not exhaustive, but give us an indication of where the definition would be or what you think the direction it would be. And then once we get a glimpse of that, then we can determine what we actually do want to define, if there's anything there to define, and then what we want to delete if we don't want to define it.
We look at the other slides and see if the definitions take care of themselves in the other slides. For instance, the setback line being the set 2 line. There's no way in the world that came out of this preamble.
yes, Sheriff, if you want to go ahead and run through the other slides, please. You're still muted.
All right, so the next one says, okay, so it says new homes and additions will have front and side yard setbacks that will place the structures on the lot to match the neighborhood streetscape and setback pattern, which may differ widely block by block. So here again is where we open up the conversation about what is the setback and what do we mean when we say match the neighborhood streetscape and setback. So again, the terms neighborhood streetscape and setback pattern are not defined. Options can include add definitions for these terms, delete the sentence, or leave the sentence as is.
I think this is closer to being the source for the set 2 than the preamble consideration is this section when it talks about setback pattern. So I misspoke earlier, but I think it all kind of runs together at some point, because I quite frankly think this whole zoning ordinance for this particular section is way too ambiguous. And I know I'm the new person on the commission, but when I look back at the other zoning sections, they're very definitive to me, more so than this one is.
Okay, so this section talks about, again, this was, a key piece of the BZA discussion, but front yard setbacks shall be the average front yard setback of the lots within the same block and on the same side of the street. So based upon that BZA decision, we need to clarify what we mean when we say front yard setback is required. So the options here are, if you all think that it is important to make sure that those houses are setting at that setback line, then we need to change that term, and we need to have a build at this point line versus the term setback in this section. So that's number one, make the front yard setback a build at line, and give a clear definition of build to means you build at this point. Number two is clarify that the front yard setback is the minimum distance allowed from the property line to the structure. And that's what's consistent with what's been our interpretation here. I mean, what has been my forever, that's what this definition of setback has meant in my book. So clarify that we mean, that's what we mean. Three, provide a build-in zone for the front of the structure. So the zone would include a minimum and a maximum setback from the property line. And then four, leave it as it is. So this is slide 4. So this is the final slide. This is the infamous front door question. So the RE zone talks about a residential orientation pattern. And it says that all new structures and front yard additions shall, one, face the same direction as the majority of the residential front facades on the block and on the same side of the street where the parcel is located. Two, have a main entrance door in the front facade of the structure. And based on how the Board of Zoning Appeals made their decision, we need to clarify, staff's opinion is we would need to clarify front facade and main entrance door. So again, the options are define front facade. A simple definition would be the facade of the structure that faces the street once the structure is placed on the lot. So that would make the front facade site specific rather than how the building maybe was constructed or how it was manufactured, if it was manufactured somewhere else or if it was moved. Number two, define main entrance door as the door placed in the front facade. Three, require architectural features for the main entrance door and or leave the front facade. Does it have to have a porch? Does it have some sort of awning or some sort of defining feature that would qualify it as a front facade entrance door? And then finally, leave it as it is.
So those are the 4 slides, and that really what we're showing once again is the vague language on the first 2 on some of those key bullet terms in those first sections, and then the more specific things regarding the BZA case that where staff interpreted one way and BZA interpreted another way, is to clarify those points. If you want to clarify, I mean, you might be perfectly acceptable with how it is. And that's why, like I said, staff needs some guidance from Planning Commission if they want to address issues in the RE zone and what those issues may be that you want to address. And then we can go from there with those. So.
Yeah, I think the setbacks and the residential orientation, clearly the Board of Appeals decided to rewrite how people define things. And so apparently we have to really set that in stone. And I think apparently we need to make it clear that a setback is not a build to line. It's a minimum distance. And So I think that needs to be defined. And same with orientation. I've seen doors moved. I've seen people renovate houses and they put the front door on what used to be the side and vice versa. So I think the recommendations to say that, you know, the facade is whatever's facing the front and it's got a door. So.
And Scott, part of the problem there was the attorney kept bringing up that you cannot do that on a manufactured home, which I tried to explain. You can do that on any building. It's changed the location of the door.
Right, exactly. And I mean, look, let's be honest. If this was a stick-built home, nobody'd be complaining. So, you know, I mean, look, a lawyer can argue anything.
Yeah.
And I mean, the fact of the matter is the Board of Appeals made decisions on stuff that, you know, I've been doing this for a decade. I've never seen definitions twisted like that. But okay, that's what happens with the zoning Board of Appeal. Yeah, that's why you have recourse to go to the courts. But from our standpoint, like I said, let's define it, what the terms of the art are. You know, a setback is a minimum distance, not a build-to distance. And the facade.
So, Scott, I think you're defining it, which may or may not be the definition we want. So it is clarifying for that neighborhood. Maybe it should be a build-to line. Anyway, so it needs defining. The question is, how do we define it?
So on those last two sections, I'm more open-minded than I am on the first two. And just to be clear, I would be open to entertaining definitions for some of the terms, but I'm not open to the ambiguity, and I'm not open to establishing architectural guidelines. If we want to establish architectural guidelines, let's do it properly through the historical zoning designation. But on the last two, you know, I'm either for leaving it as written and sending the message that this is the way it's always been interpreted, and we don't understand why anybody could interpret it any different. I'm also open to the idea to a build-to zone, you know, a maximum and a minimum. And then on the front facade, I think that just needs to be defined more clearly so that there's not some sharp-tongued attorney that can come in and say whatever needs to be said to convince people a certain way on a certain issue.
One question, the particular house that started all this, what is it considered? Is it new construction or what's the interpretation of that home?
Manufactured home, isn't it?
Well, I mean, is it new? Is it new?
New.
It'd be new construction for that property, yeah.
It would be moving existing structure from one location to another. So while it's not a new structure, it's new to the area, but it's not a new structure in terms that it was just built as a structure. And if it's a manufacturing home, it could be just built and bought into the property. So, but the one in particular was an existing structure that was relocated from one property to another in the city. Danielle?
I just was going to point out, since we don't have a definition of new construction, you can argue it several ways.
Yeah.
Right.
My opinion is what happened here was you had the majority of the members of the Board of Zoning Appeals that knew the answer that they were going to give. They were just trying to find some reasoning to come up with what they wanted to do. And what they wanted to do was not allow it. Now, I would not have wanted it in my neighborhood either, but that's not what they're supposed to be doing. They're supposed to follow the ordinances. And I feel to a large degree that what we've got to do is we've got to put some definitions in there to protect ourselves from the Board of Zoning Appeals. I think they went rogue.
I tend to agree with Kelly, and I'm on the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Well, another way to say it is to provide better definitions and directions so that it makes it clearer for a direction that they need to take. I did put the preamble in the chat just took out most everything.
So a question, just, does everybody, I guess, the first question to planning commission members would be, and to see if we have a majority, does the planning commission feel like the regulations for the RE zone need to be updated in some manner or fashion? And that would be my first question. And just run down the roll, Joel, and let's see.
Yes. I think there needs to be some clarity in especially the last two of the setbacks and the front of the house, the front of the building.
Yeah, just run down the roll for me, Joel. Your roll.
Oh, okay. Kelly?
I definitely believe we need to make some revisions. And I think it needs some definitions, not necessarily all the way across the board. Slides 2, 3, and 4 definitely need some help. 1, I can come back to it later. But I definitely want to take it out of their hands of the difference in the setback and the set 2 line, that type of thing. And as far as deciding what is a front door and so forth, I think we can handle all of that by some definitions.
Okay, Malin?
I too agree that we need some clarity put with these. Exactly what just yet, not sure, but by all means, I think there needs some clarity, because if not, we're going to be in this similar situation again at some point in time.
Jason?
I pretty much said my piece. I'm for a streamlined, well-defined, not defining all the terms that are in 1 and 2, but to the point we need to, with whatever language is left, definitively establishing it. And like I said, I'm either for leaving the language for a setback as a setback or a build zone, and not necessarily for all zoning, but I understand the historical zone a little better. And you don't want a house to sit, front entrance to sit at the back door of the next one next to it. I get that. I mean, that's reasonable. And then just define number 4. That would be my preference.
Okay, Scott?
Yeah. We got to, as Kelly so eloquently said, we got to protect ourselves from the ZBA.
Thank you. Takai, how are you?
I agree with what everyone has said. I would probably hammer it out 2, 3, and 4. But I would probably take it 2 steps further and suggest that we probably do a work session on this, and then at the same time ask the BZA group to sit in with us on this work session, so that everyone's on the same page on the definitions.
Mark Webb?
I agree with you, Joel. I have no problems with 1 or 2, but possibly 3 and 4 could have a little bit more clarity to them. To tell you the truth, I have no problem with any of it, but I understand it. But maybe that's because I'm on planning commission and know some of what those terms mean. But possibly 3 and 4 need some clarification.
Okay, Margaret?
Ditto for all of what everybody has said. And I like Takai's, if there's no problem legally to meet with BZA as well. I think trying to build education and understanding is a positive.
You could have a joint meeting as long as it's properly advertised for both boards.
Okay.
Personally, from being there, I think that really needs to happen, is have a joint meeting and try to explain, because there's nobody on, now correct me if I'm wrong, there's nobody on BZA that's done anything with the planning commission, is there, Tim?
Oh, Jack Hyder has.
Okay, Jack.
Jack has.
Ed Corner on there.
Who?
Ed Corner.
Yes, and Ted Kerner, so
He was
three
on
people,
here. He was on planning commission for several years.
long
Okay.
time.
But that was before the historical district came in, isn't it?
Possibly so. Mm-hmm.
It's been a long time since Ted was on
Okay.
PC, yeah.
Well, I think Ted was understanding the scope of the setback and the front of the building well during the meeting.
So, Mr. Chairman, do you want to, given the 3 and 4, slides 3 and 4, and that would be slide 3 is talking about front yard setback. Do you want to continue discussion tonight and see if we can agree on what this should be, whether it be a setback, a build to, or a build in between these lines?
I'll go to midnight, but it is 10 minutes to 9.
You want to
And as much as I think, well, we can handle that in 5 minutes, I don't think we will.
Well,
What do you all think?
I agree. I think it'd be good to be a little fresher, and hopefully Tim and Sheriff, maybe y'all can take some of what we've said and come back with a little bit to prompt our discussion next time.
Well,
So I think what you're saying is definitively on slides 3 and 4, we need some more clarification and definitions and explanations. And so the next time we talk about that, let's at least have a starting point of some refined language in there.
Well,
is that kind of what you said there, Margaret?
Yes, Kelly, that's exactly what I said.
Is that a motion?
Slides 3 and 4 are pretty definitive. You've got, as they're stated, I mean, it's either a setback line, a build to line, or you do a zone. I mean, I don't know what other clarity we could issue for that one. And the same with now 1 and 2, you know, we can look at some terms like characteristic and see if we can figure out something for those first couple of slides. But these 2 slides, you know, I don't know what other, I mean, it's just basically what does the PC feel is appropriate in the rezone.
Well, I think,
could I ask a question of the, could I ask a question of the fellow commissioners? Does anybody have an interest in doing a built-in zone? I mean, I'm not saying I'm for it, but I would entertain that thought in this zoning designation only. I guess not.
I don't know what that means, but I think you could have a build to, if I don't know what practice is for build to, if you can make that creative.
I think what that means is an envelope that you can build inside of. Would that be correct?
Oh,
I
thought it was an envelope that you can have flexibility of within that to build to. So
Would be for the front, it would be like you must put your front facade in between these 2 lines, be it 10 foot to 20 foot,
right?
Whatever that area is, that would be a build zone. You must build your front facade in that zone. Build to line is you must build
to that zone
at that line.
Right.
And the setback line, the common definition is you must at least, as a minimum, set back your front facade at this point. You can go further than that, but you have to, as a minimum, set it back from the front property line at this point. So,
but that also includes porches and everything, doesn't it, Tim? On the setback, if it's attached to the structure, it's part of the permanent structure, correct?
Right.
If it has a cover, a roof line over the porch, then that would be part of your front facade. If it's just a stoop or a deck that doesn't have the cover over it, there are some different language about how far those can encroach in that front yard setback area. You know, it can encroach closer to the front building line.
That also came up during the meeting, during the BZA meeting.
Yes, but if it is a covered porch, then that is included as part of your front facade. If it's an uncovered porch, then there are, in the zoning regs, not the RE, but in the rest of the zoning regs, there, well, it's in the RE too. I'm sorry, there in the RE, it does have uncovered porches, how far you can encroach those toward the front property line. So
I like
guess what-
going in the direction of Jason's build to zone.
I guess what I was trying to say is this is one area where I'm kind of in agreement with a more definitive
Right.
matching the character and existing pattern.
Yeah, but
And
that's the
only
problem.
to the front line, only to the front line. And that is, you know, I want a minimum, but I don't want to tell somebody that they have to build to that line. At the same time, I don't think it's reasonable for a neighbor to have their neighbor's, one property owner to have their neighbor's front of their building at the rear of their, that does not match the existing in any way. And so I think that's one place where we can define it. I do like Mr. Shue's recommendation of Mr. Chairman, us broaching this subject in a concentrated meeting, a work session, if you will, because it is very complex.
So that's the problem with this entire district, and that's why it was done like this, is because those houses have all different kinds of setbacks. All right, I mean the setback is the average of that block on that side, and in fact, if you look at the other side of the street, it's what, 20 feet versus 15 on the side of this house. So you can't be specific and say it's got to be 16 foot, because now you have a whole bunch of houses that are either in or out of compliance. And so, I mean, if they have a fire and they want to do something, do they have to move the entire structure back 3 feet? You know, I mean, this is the problem with this district, is it's a hodgepodge before we had zoning. And and so when you look at what they did, they said, all right, we're going to take the average, and that's the setback, the minimum setback. You know, I think the same is for a envelope. It's going to be really hard to define that, because a lot of these lots are all different sizes. They're not all the same. You know, some are squares, some are rectangles, some have all kinds of weird shapes. So, I mean, that really is why we are where we are today with this district, was to try to build some flexibility and not just be and not do that. But
yeah, but all those houses, those lots, I mean, they've all got a street. And those streets are pretty straightforward. I mean, they're not in and out themselves.
No, but the houses are, right? I mean, Sheriff brought this up last time we discussed this. On that block alone, that side of the street, that whatever 700 block, if you look at the setbacks for all the different houses, they're not the same. They vary. So, you know, and that's why they took the average of it. And if you look right across the street,
yeah,
that average is completely different. You look at the next block down, the average is different. So,
but what we're trying to establish is to go forward. You know, what has occurred is in the past. But we've got to look at, you know, establishing to go forward.
I would disagree with the statement that the 700 block has a varying degree of setbacks. That they're pretty much all equal to me. And I think you'd have to you'd still have to use an average to determine the minimum, but then there needs to be a maximum, a window, if you will, for the front setback. But, you know, it's still a block by block case. But when you look at the situation where we're on the 700 block of Pennsylvania, all of those homes, and there is some variance. Holston Avenue is completely different than the Fairmount District. Holston District is completely different. But
Tim, correct me if I'm wrong on this. When you all went into that Board of Zoning Appeals meeting, you felt like you knew what the setback needed to be because you had your averages worked out, and so you had a number.
yes, the staff had a map where they measured all the setbacks from the existing homes in the block and took the average of them. And that was the number, 25 feet, if I recall correctly. And that was to be a minimum setback. And what was happening is there were a lot of requests to set the homes closer to the road. That was in violation of the zoning ordinance because the setbacks for the different districts were larger than where the existing homes were setting. So to add some flexibility, the staff come up with the average of the existing homes, the structures in that block. But you could go, Jason, just, or really all the planning commission, one option might be to, here's what the closest home is set to the street, and here's what the furthest from the street is, and that be your building zone, your front facade building zone. So
I like that idea.
That could be a way to do that, because that would give you on that block. There's a this is the characteristic. This is the home that's built closest to the street. This is the home that's built furthest from the street. So if you build somewhere in between, obviously you're building in what's established out there already. I mean, that is an option.
I would do the closest and the average. Because if you have one outlier, that could really skew it. So anyway, we can look at different things to see
I mean, there's something in between. Yes, it could be something in between, certainly.
Right.
But obviously, looking at the time and thinking about it, just these 4 slides, if y'all can think about it with staff, we will look at those first couple of slides and see if we can clarify some of those terms to bring some clarity to them, but not tie people down to having to the city, unless we want to design standards. We'll try to clean up those first phrases and see how you all like it or not, a couple of options or several options for those. And then just think about setbacks. I mean, ultimately, we need guidance on what you all prefer, a build zone, a build to, a setback. And if it's going to be a zone, what is that zone we build? Like Margaret said, there's multiple options in that where to build zone. Encourage you to drive the neighborhoods and look at them. And likewise, think about front facade and main entrance and those terms to make sure, when we get together, obviously at some point, I think everybody's in agreement it needs to be changed, the RE some way to clarify it. And we just want to make it as easy discussion for you all as possible. Not that we will think of all the ideas. And that's why there's a lot of brains on this Zoom and not on this Zoom that can be consulted. But obviously at some point you need to have clarity and direction so we can craft the regs to take us to that point to make a recommendation to city council. So I think next time would be my thing is let us look at those first 2 sections and see if we can come up with a few options there for those. And then you all think about where each individual one you all feel about the setback issue in the front facade and main door. And maybe we can get some direction, clarity next time, and then craft the reg after that if we feel like we do have direction and clarity on that. And we can do it if everybody wants to. We could start early and do a work session early. It would obviously be a non-voting, but we can discuss, and well, Danielle might tell me otherwise, but there can be some talking to staff about the way you all feel on the regulations. So
my recommendation would be that you advertise this as a meeting. You can characterize it as a work session devoted to talking about RE, but it's a meeting essentially, even if you're not going to take a vote. But that way the public's aware of it, they can attend, and you can have free and open discussions.
And that way we could start earlier on this one topic and then go to the regular meeting at 6 o'clock. Then you could continue it after, at the end of that meeting if we needed to.
So for that,
I would suggest 5 o'clock on the next, if y'all are willing, 5 o'clock on the next, what would that be? September 21st, 22nd. What is it?
so would that be with BZA?
No,
Not yet?
no,
Okay.
no, we're not ready for that yet. I think we need to get our act together and our thoughts together before we bring them in.
Is
That's my
everybody,
thoughts.
is everybody agreeable to 5 o'clock work session next time?
Yes.
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 We'll advertise. Go ahead, Scott. Whoever was talking.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Tim, I may be out of town that day, but I'll confirm, let you know.
Okay.
At this point, we don't know if it'll be in person or not.
The governor's order expires the 29th, Danielle, is that correct? So unless it's extended.
Right.
Yeah.
I think there are discussions going on about whether to extend it or not. So we'll know come the 29th. But we'll keep you up to snuff on what's going on there with electronic meetings.
Margaret, you know it's not going away.
Well, I'm hoping there's still that option. So, and I mean, it'd be nice to be able to have a combination where people who are out of town could join by Zoom, or who are unable to attend for another reason. But anyway, we'll see what happens. It's a different world.
How come the county can get by with meetings and the city can't?
They don't care about you.
Right.
I'm still living.
So, Mr. Chairman, if we're done with this topic for the evening, just remember always your training and education. Make sure you keep that up and look at the opportunities on the bottom of that sheet and turn in any training and education that you may have taken to us so we can track it.
Is there anything else that anybody else wants to bring up tonight? That being the case, we're adjourned.
Y'all have